This is Malik. So welcome to our lessons on bearings. We want to continue our lessons on bearing of one point from another. Right, so let's look at our example here. It says the bearing of point C and point D from point A is 60 degrees and 130 degrees respectively. Illustrate this information graphically. What does it mean? With the word respectively, it tells you that the point C from point A is 60 degrees, and then point D from point A is 130 degrees. But remember, it says they are all making reference to point A. They are all coming from point A. So let's see how we're going to represent these graphically, right? So first one, we say the bearing of point C from point A is the 60 degrees, right? And then we have the bearing of point D from, we say point A, so from A is the 130 degrees, right guys? So I assume this is my point A, right? This is point A. We know this is 90 degrees, right? This is our point A. And we know that we say bearing of point C from point A is 60 degrees. And we said in the 3-point bear, we always measure from the geographical north, right? I want 60 degrees. So in the first quadrant, I gotta just move, and it has to be like more than half of it. So I'm gonna assume that this is supposed to be my 90 degrees. And 60 degrees, right? We say 60 degrees. So this angle is gonna be my 60 degrees. So I'm gonna take here as my 60 degrees. And we say the bearing of what? Point C from point A. So, and we know as we do it, we gotta show where it's moving towards, and this is gonna be point what? C. This is my C. Where it says the bearing of point C from point A is 60 degrees, right? And now let's pay attention here. The next one says the bearing of point D from point A. Again, so the same point A, the point A has already been established, and we're looking for another bearing, another point from it, which is point D. And it says the bearing of point D from the same point A is 130 degrees. This is 90 and this is 180 degrees. Then it tells me that if I'm moving, we already know that it must always start from the geographical north. So from this point, let me use this. If I'm moving all the way to, I know it's up to this point is 90 degrees. And I want 130 degrees. So how much more do I need to add to 90 to make up 130? Right, so it tells me that I'll need 40. So, and I know that between the second quadrant, the whole of this part is 90 degrees. But then I only need about half of it because I'm looking at 40, right? So if I want 40, I'm just gonna take almost half of it. Right? So it tells me this angle is 40. I just need 40 of it. And then when I add the 40 to 50, that means the whole of this part coming towards it will be 130. Right? So I can go ahead and clean this. So if I'm taking this as 40, I got to clean the 40. So it tells me now the whole of this angle coming towards it, because I'm looking for 130, right? I'm looking for 130, the whole of this is now going to be my 130, and that's point D. Remember, this is D. We're looking at point D. It says from A to D. So this, the whole of this is also going to be my 130 degrees. Right? Please, I hope that is clear. Remember, both points are all coming from the same particular point. We say point C from point A, and then point D from point A. Right? Guys, please, I hope that makes sense. Right? So I'm going to let you do number 2, which says the bearing of point B and point Q from O, meaning your initial point is O. You are starting from O. So from point P from O is 45 degrees, and then Q from O is also 120 degrees. So illustrate that graphically. Right, so let's look at the second example. The second example said the bearing of point M from point O is 100 degrees. Right? And the bearing of point N from point M is 240 degrees. Illustrate this information graphically. Now, this is different. Look at this. The bearing of point M from point O is 100 degrees. So this is a bit different. If you remember the first one, all the 2 points are moving from one point, one reference point, the point of origin. But there are 2 different ones. So let's look at the first one here. I'm talking about this, the bearing of point M from point O. So here is going to be our O. We know our geographical north to be here, right? And it says the bearing of M from O, meaning what we are going to look for is point O, right? And this is my 90 degrees. And this is my 180 degrees. Now we're looking for 100 degrees, right? If I want 100 degrees, I know this is 90. I just need 10 to be added to this. So it should be very, very small. It shouldn't be up to even half of it. So I'm going to say this part, right? So I'm moving all the way here. And I'm going to say this part is just 10 degrees. So when I add the 10 to the 90, and I know I have 100. So the whole of this angle is now my 100 degrees. It says M from O. So I'm moving from O to M, right? So this point is my M. It's 100 degrees. I've already done the first part. So let's look at the second part, which says the bearing of N from M. The M is what has been established here, this particular M. We already got M here. But we say N from this M. So now, that's what we now want to look for, right? We now want to look for M. Sorry, we want to look for N from M, meaning now our starting point, our new starting point is now M. So I'm going to start from here. It tells me my point of reference now is here. So I draw my Cartesian plane on M, right? And I know my north is here. This is my north. This is my 90 degrees. This is my 180 degrees. And this is my 270 degrees, right? And it says the bearing of N from the point M is 240 degrees. So from M, I'm looking for 240 degrees. And I know if I move from this point to this point, that's 90. If I move another, that's 90. I already have 180. So how much more do I need to add to 180 to be able to get to 240, right? Because I need 240 from the geographical north. I already have 90, 90, I have 180, and I want 260, right? So it tells me that I need 60 more. So I need 60 out of this 90, right? So, and we know it's going to be more than half. So at least we can say, if I move, let me use this color. If I move from this point all the way, maybe more than half of it is going to be my 60. So I'm going to say this point, right? So I'm going to say this is my 60. This particular part is 60 degrees. Therefore, if I add the 60 and then 180, I'm going to have the 240 degrees that I need. So it tells me now, let me use a different mark. It tells me now from the whole of this coming here is my 240 that I'm looking for, right? And we know it's n to m to n. So it's moving from this point to this, and this is going to be my n, right? So you see, with this particular question, it's a bit different, right? They're moving from different points. But with the first question, I mean, with this, all the 2 points were coming from one point of origin. They were coming from one point of origin. But with this, they are moving in 2 different directions, right? All right. So I hope this is clear. So I'm going to leave number 4 for you people to practice. Now, understanding how to draw these diagrams is very, very important because they're going to really help you in the distance bearing problems. So that's why I'm taking my time for us to go through all the necessary steps before we go into the distance bearing problem. So in our next lesson, we're going to be looking at back bearing, right? Back bearing. That from there, we now move on to solving problems in distance bearing. Thank you so much. See you in the next lesson.